welcome into Classic Wax, brought to you by the Beat Sessions. I'm your host, Mitchell Weary. Hope you've all had a fantastic day. We made it. We all survived the election madness. I'm not sure how many of you were happy or upset with the results in your own states and around the country as well. But on the bright side of things, we made it through it. I think the most important thing, as always, no matter who gets elected, is maintaining that unity, maintaining that attitude of positivity, knowing that this is a nation that's always done very well from that standpoint of persevering, from overcoming things. I think that as a country, we're all going to be good, and I'm glad to again be through that all, to be here relaxing with all of you guys. Didn't feel like competing with the election either. It seemed like kind of a big deal that most of you would have your attention turned to that. So nice to be here with you this evening. We are going back a day, kind of violating the rules a little bit, but talking about Siouxsie and the Banshees. And I am just thrilled to get into A Kiss in the Dreamhouse. It's an interesting record. Certainly, I mean, their whole catalog is phenomenal, and I think that's one of the big topics of conversation that's coming up tonight with the artists that we're going to talk about, as far as just trailblazing artists that with every record continue to set out and do something different. Might be better, might be worse than what came in previous efforts. But, that's what is so much fun about having these kind of debates, throwing out your opinions and discussing what it is about specific records, whether it's A Kiss in the Dreamhouse or Kaleidoscope or Juju or any of their records are definitely great topics of conversation. This band, its influence amongst its peers at the time, and I really feel like Siouxsie and the Banshees were there breaking ground pretty much with the Sex Pistols. It's pretty interesting. We're going to get into some of that, and excited to talk about two records that have a lot of similarities but are very different in their own right, coming from two pretty different artists in The Cure and Tyler, the Creator. But it's been a fun week. I definitely enjoyed exploring both of those records, and I definitely had a good time just interacting with all of you as far as hearing your thoughts and comments on that new Cure record. Certainly wasn't trying to say that it's the best effort since Disintegration, but I think it's fun to pose those questions throughout those debates, because The Cure is certainly a band that has done a lot of different stuff. They've built this beautiful, fantastic world that is all their own, but they still continue to try to do different things, try to expand on that sound that they've created. And I think that Songs of the Lost World is certainly an effort that highlights that skill set of theirs and what makes them such an amazing band. If you're new to the show, please subscribe to the channel, like this video, do all the things to help me blow this project up. Don't be shy to super chat anything too. If you want to throw down a question or even just make a statement, be happy to read any of that stuff live for you guys if you care to take part in that. And if you are new, just a couple stipulations about the show. I know I'm violating the rule, but the record that we talk about needs to have been released on that day. So knowing that this show is meant for November 5th, A Kiss from the Dreamhouse, released in 1982, November 5th, 1982. And then the other thing is that the record's got to be at least 20 years old. So that's a way to keep the wax topic classic. We want to go back at least a couple of decades. I feel like that's kind of the threshold where something becomes classic. And so a little insight there, a little housekeeping while we get this thing going. And I think that leading off, talking about Siouxsie and the Banshees and this band, really just a fun little twist of history and the scene that they were in. So the news story I want to lead off on this day in history, we're actually going to talk about November 6th. I'm going to cheat a little bit for the sake of just having some really fun stuff to talk about. And on this day, the Sex Pistols performed their first gig in 1975. And that's worth noting because while that band was cultivating its sound, doing its thing, playing shows, Siouxsie and bass player Steven Severin were following that band a ton and feeling the influence, feeling the drive, feeling this new energy that was raw and unparalleled versus a lot of the glam rock that had been dominating the early to mid 70s. I know that a big part of the punk movement and that drive certainly, fighting against all that, I guess, kind of like soft corporate, big commercial rock. Not that any of that's bad. I love a ton of it, but I also love the punk scene for what it brought to the table. And so Siouxsie and Steven, they spend the year of 1976 basically following the Sex Pistols around and checking out their shows. And finally, there's an event that's put on. There's an opening that becomes available because the band cancels. The manager of the Sex Pistols is the one that is booking all of the bands for the show. And so Siouxsie and Steven, they slide right in there, and they don't have a band yet. And Sid Vicious, of all people, ends up playing drums for this one gig for Siouxsie and the Banshees. Cool little piece of history. The band itself wasn't even sure if it was going to continue on after that gig, but they had a number of people around them that encouraged them to keep at it. Sid joined the Sex Pistols in February, just 3 months after that. So we all know the history and the rest of the story there. It's a sad one. It's an unfortunate one. It's when you consider the punk rock scene, what he represented, what he was about. I'll just say it's a hell of a story is all I'll say about that. If you're not familiar with it, go down that rabbit hole someday. I think most of you know about Sid and Nancy, though, and all the other antics that went on in his very short, very chaotic, disjointed life. But Sid Vicious is replaced by Kenny Morris, and then Budgie is I would say the staple, the cornerstone there behind the Skins for a band that really went through a ton of lineup changes throughout its existence. Siouxsie and Steven being the two main players. But I love Budgie. Kenny Morris, what he does on their early work and their catalog. I mean, this is a band that I really love the flat out raw punk style of their early work. And, there's songs that, I'd say the Scream and Join Hands have tracks that do embody the elements of post-punk. Like they're getting there. You can feel this desire with their music, wanting to be more experimental, more transgressive as far as, not just being boxed into that one category of sound. But it's just very interesting seeing the evolution of this band early on, the players involved, the influences, and the exchange of personnel that, while it was very brief, the blink of an eye, it's cool to know that that a band like this, and, I've never really thought that much of the Sex Pistols, to be completely honest with you. I think that it might be just something that many of you would deem ignorant of me, and if that's your opinion, that's totally okay. But given the history of the band and what they what their run was like, I mean, I know they were extremely influential, but when I listen to Siouxsie and the Banshees, for example, I mean, there's no comparing the quality of music. I would say even if the Sex Pistols had a chance to be more prolific and not have to endure the chaos that they did, I still think Siouxsie is one of the just incredible live performers that's ever done the damn thing. I really wish that in my lifetime I would have had the opportunity to see this band, see her play live, and I think that knowing how many of her peers were influenced at that time. You think about bands like Joy Division, you think about The Clash, you think about so many different acts and genres coming out of that time period and the way that music opened up, alternative music and what that's done. I mean, she's influenced alternative music in general, pockets of shoegaze, trip hop. It's pretty remarkable what she has done with this band. And talking about these connections with other musicians, being able to talk about a brand new Cure record this week, Songs of a Lost World, is an incredible effort. I think that this is really a unique effort from them, staying in that pocket that is so comfortably the Cure, but also creating tracks that I think play around with space and ambience, in a way that more so than they ever have. I feel that void of this record is any type of like bright pop element, which is something that's dominated so much of their music, and especially in this time frame, talking about Siouxsie and the Banshees and A Kiss in the Dreamhouse. I feel like right around this time frame, Robert Smith talks about playing guitar for Siouxsie and the Banshees in 1979 while they were on tour, offering it up. They couldn't find a guitar player that was fit in the mold after finding Budgie on the drums. So Smith offered his services, went back and played from 82 to 84 as well. Pretty much picked up guitar right after the release of A Kiss in the Dreamhouse. It's unfortunate, but John McGeoch, suffering just from, substance abuse, was fired from the band. And, Robert Smith takes over again for another couple of years. But I love his quote, talking about these big players. And, he says that, what does he say? He says, on stage, the first night with the Banshees, I was blown away by how powerful I felt playing that kind of music. It was so different to what we were doing with The Cure. Before that, I'd wanted us to be like the Buzzcocks or Elvis Costello, the punk Beatles. Being a Banshee really changed my attitude to what I was doing. It's crazy to think that a little time on stage was Siouxsie, and that's how The Cure ended up being The Cure. But you listen to that early sound of what Robert Smith was doing with that outfit, and it's just fascinating knowing that, had they not been at that certain place in that certain point of time, what their catalog and what their career may have ended up like. And I think ultimately Robert would have had that influence from Siouxsie, but it's wild seeing these guys this far into their career, and the impact that they've had sonically on so many different acts. But I think that Siouxsie and the Banshees is one of those acts that's quietly been very influential. And thanks to the likes of all these fantastic musicians, I feel like Siouxsie and the Banshees falls into that kind of like musician category. If you know, and I'll admit it took me a while to dig a little deep into them. I didn't have a whole lot of access to their catalog growing up as a kid. And, and if I was listening to this kind of music, it was The Cure, it was Depeche Mode, it was New Order. My friends weren't necessarily, and I wasn't necessarily inclined to, I guess, listen to the female rock and roll angle. And especially thinking about, going back to the early 90s and how much things have changed as far as the dominance of the male figure in music in general. I just think it's great to see, even if it's taken all this time, with streaming service, it's so helpful, but it's great to see, artists like Siouxsie and the Banshees get their due, Kate Bush blowing up with Stranger Things, just these instances of all these extremely influential female artists that may have received some type of recognition, but I feel like they're really getting their due more than ever now. But back to The Cure, this new record, again, I think that it is unique in that right of, we're not talking about an album with a lot of pop hooks, really any at all. This is about creating this very almost like morbidly cathartic experience. This album focusing on death, the finality that's there, and it feels appropriate. It feels honest when you think that Robert Smith and these guys are all in their mid 60s. They're they've approached and reached that point in their lives where, yes, the idea of death is becoming very real, and something that we wake up every day knowing that it could be our last, that we do have to deal with that. But also, the more days that you got, the more you realize that they are coming to an end. They are winding down, and this record, I think, captures the sadness and the disappointment that does come from losing the grip on our youthful vitality of that energy of that time, but finding that balance, because there's a lot sonically in this record that is so joyful. I mean, it's just pure bliss, a celebration, and it's that, I feel like it's that idea. It's them being able to sonically convey that feeling of joy that one has when they do reflect upon a life well lived. Is it sad that it is over? Yes. but knowing that you've done something incredible, that you've set out and accomplished so much, that there still is time to do other things. That's another driving factor. I feel The Cure's music has always really been so brilliantly complicated and complex in that regard. The feeling, the evocative nature of the sounds that they create and the different emotions that pull you in different directions but feel so authentically human. That whether it's the early stuff, whether Robert Smith is talking about being in love and the sadness there, or whether it's this new record and dealing with the sadness of death and trying to, I guess, find a path forward, trying to find some closure on coming to terms with that. I'm coming to terms with the fact that one day it will be my last, and it's a really unique record. It's not an everyday wake up and have your morning cup of coffee kind of record, but I think it's something that deserves everybody's time, and I hope you've all had a chance to check it out. The other record, it's really, I enjoyed the hell out of this week, and I just enjoyed the hell out of this man, Tyler, the Creator, throwing down quite a unique effort. And, talking about Siouxsie and the Banshees and how with every record, something different sonically, creating that foundation of who they are and what they're trying to do, but also making a point of highlighting nuance, playing with different instrumentation, playing with different genres, forming just cohesive albums as a whole. I think it's one of the things that Tyler, the Creator, does so extremely well. The continuity of a record. It's, an album is an experience in and of itself. It's not just about tracks and putting out singles. And I think not just hip hop, but in popular music in general, we have pretty much kind of reached this point. It's funny to watch the cycles of popular music, the ebb and flows, like what medium is dominated. But I think for a long time now, with streaming services, the accessibility to quickly pick songs and put together playlists, the ephemeral nature of a lot of music, that it's just there for that place and time, for that moment. I feel like Tyler is the type of guy that is building something bigger, something that's meant to, sit in your shelf and collect a little dust, and periodically you go back to it and you rethink it. You rethink what the material is saying to you, what it's saying about the world around you. He's a complex guy, and I love that as he's continued to create music, not just branching out sonically, but opening up from a personal standpoint in his lyricism. I think he's matured a lot on this new record, Chromacopia. It's interesting. I like the phrase I used. He is bombastically reticent. He's not one to really divulge what he's feeling oftentimes. And when he does, it seems like it blows up, and he's not shy about phrasing things in a way that will grab your attention and maybe kind of throw a little shock value as well. But I think that overall his end goal is, it's not just shock value. The shock value is there to drive the point home, to drive home, whether it's his frustrations, whether whatever emotion he's dealing with, whatever he's trying to convey. It's not always the most constructive approach, but I mentioned in the review, was talking about Jonathan Swift and A Modest Proposal, and I think that when it's a piece that I love to bring up because it's hundreds of years old, and you think about how profane the idea of something like that is, suggesting it, even though it is just sarcasm, but suggesting that and throwing it out there as a means of, making people actually realize their own ridiculous behavior and coming together. And it's something that I think is important in times like the times that we're experiencing now. Sometimes a little shock can bring people down. Sometimes they'll lose their equanimity, and I think that having to just be grounded in a reality that's not necessarily one that you expected, it wasn't one of your making, let's say, is something that is what character is built on. And I think that Tyler's the type of guy that's putting out material to challenge us, and he's always going to continue to make records that challenge us. And Chromacopia is just another great addition to his catalog, and I think for that reason of challenging, but also opening up personally, and giving us more of that vulnerable side, showing us, and I think it comes with age too, softening up a little bit, knowing that you don't always necessarily need to have that edge. You don't always have to necessarily wear that mask. I think that's why that album cover is so brilliant. And if you haven't had a chance to check this record out, please give it a go. And that gets us into our album of the week, Kiss in the Dreamhouse, Siouxsie and the Banshees. Love this band. And again, they're one that it was so exciting growing up, getting into bands like The Cure, getting into Joy Division, getting into The Clash. And then, finally having, more exposure to just people in general in college, right? But I went to school from 2002 to 2006. So this was, the height of the iPod. You still had to, you could, download some stuff through different platforms, but it always took a lot of time. There was corrupted files. There was all this stuff. There was still the angle of being able to borrow CDs from people and rip them into your device, get a backup hard drive for all that storage. But Siouxsie and the Banshees was one that, thankfully, good buddy in school was super into them, and getting into these discussions about what we liked, first meeting each other, and it didn't take long for that person to throw a couple of albums my way, and I've been in love ever since. It's cool that it worked out. November 5th, the release date of this record, 1982, follows up their 1981 record Juju, which a lot of people consider that to be one of their best records. There's Kaleidoscope, 1980, the release of that record. A lot of people look at Peep Show in 88. I mean, this is a band that you look at the run of their catalog, 11 records, and none of them are bad. Like, there's a lot of good stuff to listen to on every single one of those albums. So their catalog, it's been a minute since I've revisited some of these records. So I always love getting the chance of dipping back, checking out some stuff that I haven't listened to in a long time. Kiss in the Dreamhouse is a record that it had been a minute since it got in a spin. So just excited to get into that track list here for you real quick. The album, it opens up with Cascade. And I absolutely love the opening of this song. You get it's like this shuddering bass and synths that they just have this shuffling feel that as they fade in, they're disjointed, but they're also airy. And I love that about the atmosphere of this record. I think, a lot of people call this their most experimental record up to this point. And I think that the tension that you feel in a lot of the sonic elements, but their airy qualities is such an amazing contrast, and it's something that's working brilliantly on so many of these songs. I love the slow build and the twinkly guitar that walks in on this track. The chorus is going to up the tempo. It's really catchy, really poppy, and I think that this is a record that up to this point, Kaleidoscope, there's so many elements of pop music obviously there, but I think it's a little more experimental in nature. I think that this record is them kind of hitting that radio friendly point a little bit, as far as just that sound. Maybe not radio friendly, but just I guess just more approachable. But this particular Cascade's a great way to open up the song. I love and I just love the acoustic textures. They're a band that I think of a band like Echo and the Bunnymen, who probably took a ton of influence in that regard. Just the breezy acoustic backing that you get in a lot of those guitars. Great textures there. And then the playful circus-like breakdown on this song is super interesting. It leads to this big coda. Great number to open up this record. Your second song is Green Fingers. You got heavy synths and a drum count off that open this thing up. And they give way to this. It's a recorder. Like, I love how rockin' that Siouxsie's able to make the recorder on this song. Soft driving percussion that enters with that. The guitars build in to start a little after that, and I love, as that texture builds, there's just layers that keep coming in. They kind of drift into chaos. This is like jazzy new wave the way that recorder keeps moving in and out. This is a track that it feels futuristic. It feels almost fantasy-like. There's so many different interesting elements to it that make it unique and a great second song as far as keeping the energy. Obsession is your third song. Bass drum and guitar exchange time on this. I really I love that opening there and that element. The vocal dominates while you get this ominous bell and other spooky textures, and they build in lavishly. I love it. The strings that enter around 1:40 are superb, and they create this really contrasting air. Again, you get that darkness and just that kind of airiness from the strings. Percussion builds minimal layers that are really nice. This music fades into a coda that's going to favor the vocal that Siouxsie's throwing down, and then you get just the close, the eeriness of those noises that open up the song and the textures that are created there. I'll say that about Siouxsie and the Banshees. They're spooky on a level that a lot of bands try, but I mean, this is a song that, it's called Obsession. It's meant to be pretty eerie, and the music conveys that. This is a song that just, it makes you uncomfortable. It builds and creates this tension, and it's one of the things that's so magnificent and brilliant about it. She's a Carnival is your fourth track. Driving bass and frenetic drums. Got this swirling guitar to open. The vocal hits with the snare and the percussion. I love when the vocal hits and you finally get that snare drum element on this song. It's just one of the great nuances of this track. And I love the way that this song finds its groove. It really is just a catchy, funky song. And again, displaying that shift more towards a pop consciousness, so to speak, in their music. Coda is this just trippy ballpark style organ, another spooky element to this album. It's going to lead into your side one closer circle. You get this pulsating synth and vocal to open, and this is another trippy track. It feels a little psychedelic, maybe like something that could have been on Kaleidoscope, but again, nice, just a nice pop, approachable pop element to it. Stomping drums build in on this track. Simple musical textures that work in and out, but again, just creating that horrific tension and atmosphere with the music and the progression of this composition. And it's a great way to close out the A side. Melt is your B side opener. Breakbeat and arpeggiated electric riff that's atmospheric. I love the kind of Neapolitan nature, the flair of the instrumentation there. It almost kind of sounds like it could have come from a medieval chord as well. It's I'm feeling different influences from that nuance, and it really makes this song fun and unique. But drums maintain this driving shuffle through the song, super catchy, super fun, and a great way to kind of pull off the energy of Circle. Painted Bird is your seventh track. This is probably my favorite song on this record. This song is just nasty, in my opinion. Driving bass, drum and synths with this dark twinkle. The guitars are brilliant, and I love the riff in this song. They got this heavy tone, but a lightness that kind of carries with the rhythm. And then the main riff is, again, just exceptional. This thing is going to descend into this kind of spacey, synth-driven breakdown, but then that riff just brings this back to earth. And one of I think the best songs in their catalog. I absolutely adore this track. Got this hard pulsating synth that closes out in the coda, kind of catches you off guard a little bit. It's one of those, you think a new track has started, but this thing has just shifted and given you something a little different. Cocoon is your penultimate track, your eighth song, throwing some jazz just right in our faces. And you can feel that influence at times through this record, but it's just flat out no shame. I mean, they wrote a jazz song for this track, Cocoon. It's going to take it to a totally different space until you get that spooky twinkle, and even in the bass that's working there, I feel like Steven is just absolutely killing it with regards to his work on that particular track. It feels different, but it still feels like it belongs on this record. And again, especially when that piano comes in, you get another unnerving track that it builds in on that psychedelic territory. There's moments where you get bits of that and then it backs off, but just a full improvisational feel on this song as well, which talking about Tyler the Creator and talking about just some of these albums that we have recently as well, it's it's great when you feel, something that's being made in the studio have that authentic kind of like one take and go feel to it. And this is a song that I've always just felt captures that so well. And then Slow Dive is probably the most well-known track maybe on this record. Your album closer is brilliant, thick driving bass, get this high-pitched frenzied strings. Drums take the place of the strings, like pretty immediate in the opening. And I love the muted shuffle on the guitars, the harmonies and the strings that they continue to work in. And this is just a big driver. I mean, this is almost kind of like a string-driven dance track. There's I really think the only thing that's absent from this song that kept it from being just a big radio-friendly banger was like a catchy vocal hook. But the song doesn't need it. It is just so like the music, the way that this composition carries from start to finish, even writing that, that mode, that simple beat, it's still something that evolves and opens up texturally and is a really cool way to close out this record. Very excited to celebrate what has been a pretty cool week with The Cure, Tyler, the Creator. Why not talk about Siouxsie and the Banshees, an artist that and a band that I'd say has been kind of overlooked and underrated over the years. I think, again, they're your musician type. People that are really into music, and I'm thankful for those people because they're the ones that got me as far as I have. But this is an exceptional band, an exceptional record. Curious to see what you guys' thoughts are. I always like to see where people like to rank stuff. So if you want to throw that down in some comments, that would be great. But otherwise, thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned throughout the week for more album reviews, and we'll see you next time on Classic Wax.